Good evening and welcome to APT Opinion, where we cut through the noise and question the narratives shaping our world. Tonight, we turn our focus to Europe, a continent that once defined diplomacy, stability, and balance, but now finds itself entangled in a new kind of confrontation. Europe is falling, not with a bang, but with the slow, deliberate exhaustion of a continent caught in Vladimir Putin's geopolitical trap. What was once a project of unity, peace, and pragmatic cooperation is now descending into militarization, paranoia, and economic fatigue. The irony is sharp. The European Union, in its effort to defend itself from Russia, is transforming into exactly the kind of security-obsessed bloc it once claimed to transcend. The latest proof lies in the leaked Defence Readiness Roadmap 2030. This document lays bare how deeply Europe has internalized the language of perpetual conflict. The roadmap envisions an ambitious drone wall. That's the popular term for it, although Europe itself appears to be divided on even the name. This wall will stretch across the eastern flank of the EU, or what's being envisioned as a so-called network-based drone capability, meant to be fully operational by the end of 2027. What exactly is it? Well, the plan describes multi-layered anti-drone systems capable of detection, tracking, and neutralization of aerial threats, and even precision strikes on ground targets. In other words, Europe is not merely defending itself, it is preparing for a battlefield that extends across its own borders. This Eastern Flank Watch, bundled with grand projects like the Air Defence Shield and Defence Space Shield, sounds impressive on paper. But when you look closer, it reveals the EU's deep insecurity and the lack of clear vision beyond slogans of deterrence. The roadmap promises timelines, integration, interoperability, but crucially, it offers no new financing mechanisms, not one. Where's the money going to come from? While Brussels talks of a €131 billion defence budget in its next multi-annual cycle and €18 billion for military mobility, these numbers pale in comparison to the scale of ambition being proposed. Member states are expected to source at least 60% of their defence budgets from the European defence technological and industrial base, and even from Ukraine by 2030. Yet, the Commission's only solution for how to fund this massive transformation is to facilitate private investment through the European Investment Bank and the €1 billion funds of funds. In short, Europe is promising a military revolution with no money to pay for it. This is the first part of Putin's trap, Europe's self-imposed overreach. Now, while Russia invests strategically and selectively in defense technologies that serve its immediate interests, Europe is chasing symbolic projects. A drone wall across its borders, an air shield across the skies, defense corridors across the continent. They all sound like scenes from a dystopian movie, not the prudent strategy of a bloc built on post-war diplomacy. Now, the second part of Putin's trap is even more insidious. As Europe doubles down on militarization, NATO, and remember, NATO is an alliance led by the US that effectively dictates European defense policy, NATO is escalating its own posture. According to The Telegraph, NATO defense chiefs are now privately lobbying to change the organization's engagement guidelines to allow the shooting down of Russian jets carrying ground attack missiles. US General Alexis Grinkevich, NATO's supreme allied commander Europe, has reportedly called for a unified single air and missile defense system to fill the gaps that currently prevent member states from engaging Russian aircraft. If that sounds dangerously close to an open conflict, that's because it is. A single miscalculation, one radar lock, one missile launch could set off a chain of retaliation that no European leader could control. And yet, this escalation continues even as the Secretary General Mark Rutte publicly ensures that NATO has all the authorities needed and will not take down an airplane unless it poses a threat. Is anyone convinced? Now, behind closed doors, generals talk of preemption. In front of the cameras, politicians talk of restraint. It's the same doublespeak that has defined Europe's approach since the Ukraine conflict began, a mix of moral posturing and strategic confusion. Meanwhile, Moscow watches, amused and patient. Every euro Europe spends on weapons is one less for schools, hospitals and industries. Every new defense project deepens the divide between Brussels and its citizens, who are already struggling under the weight of inflation and energy insecurity. Putin doesn't need to invade Europe. He just needs to let it militarize itself into collapse. And remember, the new roadmap's promise of a unified EU-wide military mobility area meant to streamline the movement of troops and hardware comes at a time when Europe can barely move goods across borders without the bureaucratic red tape and paralysis. The plan envisions harmonized rules for the transport of soldiers and military equipment across the Union by the end of 2027. Yet, some EU countries still require up to 45 days to process such requests. The idea of lightning-fast troop movements across the continent while roads crumble and logistic chains logjam borders on pure fantasy. And all of this, the drone walls, the air shields, the defense corridors, is being built in the name of deferring Russia, even as Moscow shows no interest in attacking the EU. All actual evidence shows Russia's focus remains the security of its immediate frontier and the neutralization of what it sees as NATO encroachment. Still, so many in the West continue to paint Putin as a man scheming for European domination, ignoring that Europe itself has done more to erode its unity and security than any external enemy ever could. The consequences are already visible. Economically, Europe is faltering. Germany, once the industrial heart of the continent, is flirting with recession. France is battling street protests and political disillusionment. Eastern European states, once champions of EU solidarity, are increasingly prioritizing national interests. The vision of a united Europe, defending liberal democracy, has given way to a bloc divided by economic hardship, political fatigue, and rising populism. And this is precisely the trap Putin designed. Not a military trap, but an economic, psychological, strategic one, to push Europe to militarize itself, to fracture internally, and to drain its resources under the illusion of defending itself. Each new EU initiative, each NATO escalation, and each sanctions package feeds into the same narrative that Europe is losing its composure and surrendering its diplomatic heritage in exchange for American security guarantees. Moscow doesn't need to conquer Europe. Europe is doing that to itself by surrendering to fear, by allowing Washington to dictate its strategic posture, and by turning away from the kind of pragmatic diplomacy that once defined leaders like Charles de Gaulle and Schroeder. So here we are. Europe is building walls, digital ones, drone ones, ideological ones, when what it truly needs are bridges. Bridges of diplomacy, of energy cooperation, of realism. But instead of looking east and finding a balance, Europe is locking itself in a fortress of its own making. Putin's greatest victory is not on the battlefield. It's in the minds of European policymakers who now see the world only through the prism of confrontation. That is his trap, and Europe has walked right into it, eyes wide open. Let us know your views in the comments and subscribe to APT.